Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. Today we're talking about power. We're talking about what happens when you have great power and how power can corrupt us and how power can make us arrogant and fall down and even go on the dark side and become evil, hurtful to others. Power has great power over us. Often we think we are powerful. But in fact, our power is extremely limited. And it's limited to the fact that as long as your heart is beating, you still have some strength, you have some power. What if your heart stopped beating? What if you stop breathing? Where's your power? No matter if you're the president of the country, no matter what position you have, no matter what wealth you have, no matter what fame you have, there are many forces that make it possible for you to even be alive. What to say of having strength or health or power. So in today's episode, we're going to take a look at the extraordinary power of Balaram. Balaram is no different than Krishna, the Supreme Godhead. Yet he is different. In the earlier episode, a couple episodes back, we talked about how Balaram is the first and direct expansion of the Supreme Godhead, Sri Krishna. Krishna has a dark complexion, but Balaram has a complexion that is compared to a white spring cloud. Krishna while he is the Supreme Lord and engaged in so many pastimes, Balaram assists him in the mood of service. When Krishna comes to Vrindavan 5,000 years ago, Balaram assists him or comes along with him as his elder brother. And when Krishna comes as Ram, Balaram accompanies him as Lakshman. You see, the relationship is very deeply intricate. The Supreme Godhead, Sri Krishna, never comes alone. He always comes with his loved ones. He comes with his associates. He never is alone. He expands himself into multiple forms of himself and then down to the tiny little living entities that we are. We are tiny, infinitesimal particles of the divine, of God. And while we may think we are God, we're not. While we may want to enjoy as God, we cannot. Because our power is very small. Our ability is very small. No matter even if you're the greatest person on earth, or if you're the greatest person that ever lived, power is very small. He is the supreme enjoyer, the supreme creator, the supreme owner, the supreme Godhead. And that's why, and we have a relationship with him and a connection with him, and we need to reestablish that. And that's the whole point of human existence. So Balaram assists in Krishna's innumerable pastimes in both the spiritual and material realms. Besides all these different pastimes, he also expands to become Mahashankarshan, from whom come Karnodakshai Vishnu or Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, Karnodak. So there's so many different expansions that Balaram becomes part of. And in all of them, he's there serving Krishna in all these different expansions. So I won't go into too much detail here with Balaram because we've talked about it earlier. Our narrative today begins with the conversation between Shukadev Goswami, the great sage, and the king Parikshit. Now they're sitting on the river bank. Parikshit is about to die, and the great sage has been telling him the pastimes of Krishna. And now Parikshit's saying, I wish to hear further about Sri Balaram, the unlimited and immeasurable Supreme Lord, whose activities are all astounding. What else did he do? If you notice the eagerness of Parikshit, He's got 7 days left to live. And in those 7 days, he wants to maximize it by learning as much as he can, by inquiring, by searching, by going deeper and deeper and deeper. For 7 days and 7 nights, they're just talking about the pastimes of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Godhead. And his eagerness doesn't wane. His eagerness doesn't become less. And he wants to know all the intricate details that he can find out. And so what else did Balaram do? Because he'd heard about Balaram earlier and some of their pastimes, but now he's like getting more and more curious. That's the beauty of this. The more we hear, the more we want to hear. There is no ending this. There is no end to these pastimes. The deeper you go into them, and I'm even touching it just on the surface, there is so much more depth you can go into, so much more meaning, so much more understanding, so much more inspiration that you can derive. So Parikshit, the king, is deriving the greatest of pleasure by hearing these pastimes. And I tell you this, that the more you hear them, and with an open mind, the more your eagerness, the more your curiosity, the more your understanding grows. This is not like listening to regular stories. These are pastimes that tell us about the nature of the divine, of that supreme being, Krishna, and his brother right now, Balaram. And at times it was about Radha, and it was about different incarnations in the Srimad Bhagavatam that we've talked about. So Shukdev Goswami, the sage who is answering all the king's questions, says, there was a powerful ape named Dvivida, who was the brother of Mainda. Actually, Mainda and Dvivida are eternally liberated devotees who are worshipped along with Ram. Okay, so this Dvivida is known to be an ape-like character. Now, during the pastimes of Ram, we hear about such beings. They don't seem to be there so much during the time of Krishna. So clearly there was an earlier time when Ram appeared on this earth. Some say it's around 12,000 years ago, and some say it's longer, further back, that there were beings who looked somewhere like a cross between human and ape. Perhaps that's the missing link. I don't know. But those beings were very intelligent, unlike what we might think, oh, ape, or just some kind of animal. No. They were highly intelligent and often highly spiritual. Not all of them, but often. In the case of Hanuman, we hear of the great powers of Hanuman. But Hanuman, which some people think was a god, a monkey god, that's not true. That is not true at all. Hanuman was in fact a great devotee of Ram. And when you see pictures of Lakshman, that is Ram's brother, and Sita, his wife, you will also see pictures of Hanuman bowing down at their feet, serving them in the deep mood and humility of servitude. How can I serve you, my dear Ram? Now, this Dvivida was some similar species. Very, very powerful, very strong, and as it said earlier, a eternally liberated devotee of Sri Ram. However, there was a time where during the Leela of Ram, Dvivida had disrespected Lakshman, Ram's brother. And because of that, he became, when you offend the Supreme Being or one of his devotees or one of his loved ones, that offense has very deep karmic effect on you. It is considered like a mad elephant offense, according to Sri Chaitanya, where it destroys your spiritual growth by offending a devotee of God, a loved one of God. Therefore, it's very important to avoid such offenses. However, this Dvivida, this ape-like being, ape-human being, had committed such an offense. And because of that, he became corrupted in his own consciousness. And gradually, as after the disappearance of Ram and Lakshman and Sita from this world, he continued to live. But now as he lived, he became a great friend of the Asura, or the demonic person, Naraka. This Narak, during the time of Krishna, thousands of years later, is the one who had kidnapped thousands of young princesses and whom Krishna had ultimately killed. We've gone over that incident in an earlier narrative where Krishna killed Narak Asura, and then released the thousands of princesses that Narak had captured. Then all of them wanted to get married to Krishna. They spoke about how they'd always thought of him, they'd always been fascinated by him, they'd always loved him, and now that they'd been kidnapped by this Asura, no one was going to marry them, and they begged Krishna, please marry us. And Krishna said, all right. And he arranged for them to go to his kingdom, and he arranged for them to have palaces, each of them. And we're going to hear in the next episode more about that. But for now, we're going on to understand that what happened to this Dvivida, this person who had become a friend of Naraka. The ape Dvivida had become very angry because Krishna had killed his friend, Narak, right? And so now, because of his anger, this Dvivida ravaged the land, meaning the kingdom of Krishna, setting fires that burned cities, villages, mines, and cowherd dwellings with the intention of destroying Krishna's flourishing kingdom. Once Dvivida tore up a number of mountains and used them to devastate all the neighboring kingdoms. Like he would tear down the trees and he would just throw them down into the valley or into the village and destroy houses and just all kinds of crazy stuff. Another time he entered the ocean, and with the strength of, almost as if he had the strength of 10,000 elephants, because he was that strong, he churned up the waters of the ocean with his arms and thus submerged the coastal regions. The wicked ape tore down the trees in the hermitages of exalted sages and contaminated their sacrificial fire. So they have the yagya fire, right? And he would contaminate it with his feces and urine. It's just really fallen off the path of dharma, and he had become very evil. Just as a wasp imprisons smaller insects, Dvivida arrogantly threw both men and women into caves in a mountain valley and sealed the caves shut with boulders. Once, while Dvivida was thus engaged in harassing the neighboring kingdoms and polluting women of respectable families, he heard very sweet ringing or singing coming from the Raivatak mountain. So he went there. And there he saw Balaram, Sri Balaram, adorned with a garland of lotuses and appearing most attractive in every way. Balaram was singing amidst a crowd of young women, and since he had drunk Varuni liquor, his eyes rolled as if he was intoxicated. Now, the Supreme Godhead is never intoxicated. However, he is play acting as a human here. And you'll see how he was not at all affected by that, by what happens next. Balaram's body shone brilliantly as he behaved like a king of elephants, surrounded by beautiful women. The mischievous ape climbed a tree branch and then revealed his presence by shaking the tree and making the sound, Kila, 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 Kila. When Balaram's consorts saw the ape's impudence, they began to laugh, being fond of joking and prone to silliness. They thought the ape's just being silly and playful. Even as Balaram looked on, Dvivida insulted the girls by making odd gestures with his eyebrows, coming right in front of them and showing them his anus. Angered, Balaram, the best of fighters, hurled a rock at him, thinking, just get drive him off. But the cunning ape dodged the rock and grabbed Balaram's pot of liquor. He then laughed, ridiculed Balaram, and broke the pot. After that, he began pulling at the girl's clothing. The powerful ape was puffed up with false pride, and he continued to insult Balaram. The word that is used in this verse is avinayam, which means without humility. The Vivida completely lacked any humility, modesty, and shamelessly performed the most wicked of activities. Balaram, seeing the ape's rude behavior, and thought of the disruptions he had created in the surrounding kingdoms. So, with all that in mind, Balaram angrily picked up his club and his plow weapon, having decided to put this Dvivida to death. Mighty Dvivida also came forward to do battle, uprooting a tree with one hand. He rushed towards Balarama and struck him on the head with the tree trunk. Now, imagine being struck on the head with a tree trunk. But Balaram remained as motionless as a mountain and simply grabbed the log as it fell upon his head. He then struck Dvivida with his club. Struck on the skull by Balaram's club, Dvivida became brilliantly decorated by the outpour of blood like a mountain beautified by red oxide. Look at the beautiful description here. Ignoring the wound, Dvivida uprooted another tree, stripped it of leaves by brute force, and struck Balaram again. Enraged, Balaram shattered the tree into hundreds of pieces. So imagine Balaram's power. Someone's throwing a tree at you and you're just knocking it into pieces. Upon which Dvivida grabbed yet another tree and furiously attacked Balaram again. This tree too Balaram smashed into hundreds of pieces. Dvivida kept on uprooting trees which Balaram destroyed. This went on till the forest became treeless. The angry ape then released a rain of stones upon Balaram, but the wielder of the club easily pulverized them all. Srila Prabhupada writes, when no more trees were available, Dvivida threw large pieces of stone like rainfall upon the body of Balaram. Balaram, in great sporting mood, began to smash these big pieces of stone into mere pebbles. Even today, there are many sports wherein people enjoy striking a ball with a bat, right? Like baseball, like cricket. This sporting propensity exists originally in the Supreme Godhead, who playfully pulverized the deadly boulders hurled at him by the powerful Dvivida. So you see, there's a whole game going on in here. Balaram's having fun. He's enjoying this attack. Dvivida, the most powerful of apes now, clenched his fists at the end of his palm tree-sized arms. He had huge arms, and he clenched his fists and came before Balaram and beat his fists against Balaram's body. Balaram then threw aside his club and plow, because the rule of warfare was such in those days that if you match a person according to the weapons they have. So when he's going barehanded, then you got to go barehanded too. So he threw aside his weapons, and then with his bare hands, he hammered a blow upon Dvivida's collarbone. The ape collapsed, vomiting blood. When he fell, the entire mountain, the Raivatak mountain, shook along with its cliffs and trees. He was that big, he was that heavy. The mountain shook like a wind-tossed boat at sea. In the heavenly planets, the devas, the demigods, the perfect mystics, and great sages cried out, Jai Ho! Glories to you, victory to you, obeisances to you, pranam, excellent, well done. And they showered flowers upon Balaram. Having thus killed Dvivida, who had disturbed the entire world, the Supreme Lord returned to his capital as the people along the way chanted his glories. We now go on to another incident around Balaram. So this begins with the story of Jambavati's son. Her son's name was Samba. So the killing of Dvivida had happened in a very, very dramatic way. And Balaram had just, completely knocked him out. So now we're continuing this to the next narrative, in which Krishna's wife, Jambavati, had a son named Samba. Now this boy, Samba, who was now a grown man, was always victorious in battle. And when he kidnapped Duryodhan's daughter, Lakshmana, from her Swayamvar ceremony. Now this deserves some explaining. Duryodhan is the prince, the heir apparent of the Kuru dynasty. And the king at that point is Dhritarashtra. He's the blind king. And if you've read the Bhagavad Gita, then this begins with the story of Dhritarashtra, inquiring about what's going on in the battlefield. This Duryodhan is the one who is the cause, really, of the battle of Mahabharat. Now, there are some names you're going to come across. I'd like you to get familiar with them. We're going to be talking about the Kuru dynasty, or the Kauravas, and this includes King Dhritarashtra, the blind king, and his son, Prince Duryodhan. We're also going to be talking about Krishna's dynasty, which is known as the Yadava dynasty, or the Vrishnis. So don't get confused. These are the two names that are going to come up. And that's why I thought you might as well get clear about that as we start. All right, so Srila Prabhupada writes in the Krishna book, Duryodhan, the son of Dhritarashtra, had a marriageable daughter by the name of Lakshmana. She was a very highly qualified girl, and many princes wanted to marry her. In such cases, they have a Swayamvar ceremony, so that the girl may select her husband according to her own choice. Today's modern day India, they could learn a thing or two from the ancient times. The girl would select her husband according to her own choice. Now, in Lakshmana's Swayamvar assembly, when the girl was to select her husband, Krishna's son Samba, son of Jambavati, one of Krishna's key wives, appeared. Samba appeared, and there's a little something about Samba that you should know. He was known to be a very bad child, sort of like a spoiled brat. And he was very much his mother's pet. All the sons of Krishna were as qualified as their great father Krishna, as strong, as powerful. Now Samba wanted the daughter of Duryodhan, this Lakshmana, although she was not inclined to have him. Therefore, what Samba did was he kidnapped her by force from the Swayamvar ceremony in front of all the princes who had assembled there. Krishna is known to have done things like that in the past, but usually it's the person wanted to marry him. In this case, Lakshmana did not want to marry Samba, and it was to be her choice, but now he's kidnapped her. At this point, the Kurus, her family, right, the Kuru dynasty, became very angry, and they said to themselves, this ill-behaved boy has offended us, forcibly kidnapping our unmarried daughter against her will. Arrest him. Arrest this ill-behaved Samba. What will the Vrishnis, that is Krishna's family, do? By our grace they are ruling, and we have granted them their kingdom. If the Vrishnis come here, when they learn about what their son has been captured, we will break their pride. Thus they will become subdued. So they saw this as a double-sided benefit. A, they would get back and teach a lesson, get back their daughter, Duryodhan's daughter, and they would teach the Vrishnis, that is Krishna's family, a lesson. After saying this and having their plan sanctioned by the senior member of the Kuru dynasty, they set out to attack Samba. Now, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the elders of the Kuru dynasty mentioned here is Bhishma, who gave permission to the younger men as follows. Bhishma was the grandsire, the grandfather. Since this maiden has now been touched by Samba, she cannot take any other husband, Bhishma said. He must become her husband. Nonetheless, you should arrest him and tie him up to make a statement about his impropriety and our own prowess. But in no case should he be killed. He made it very clear. So since they had that order, they began to chase Samba, 6 of them. Duryodhana and his companions rushed towards Samba, who himself was a great fighter. Samba took up his position on his chariot with his splendid bow and stood alone like a lion, fighting them off. Determined to capture him, the angry bowman, led by Karan, shouted at Samba, "Stand and fight! Stand and fight!" And they came straight for him and showered him with arrows. Now, Karna was a great, great warrior. As Krishna's son Samba was being unjustly harassed by the Kurus, that darling of the Yadu dynasty, of Krishna's dynasty, did not tolerate their attack any more than a lion would tolerate an attack by puny animals. Twanging his wonderful bow, heroic Shambhas struck with arrows the 6 warriors headed by Karn. He pierced the 6 chariots with as many arrows, each team of 4 horses with 4 arrows, and each chariot driver with a single arrow, and he similarly struck the great bowman who commanded the chariots. The enemy warriors congratulated Samba for his display of prowess, but they forced him down from his chariot, and thereupon 4 of them struck his 4 horses, 1 of them struck down his chariot driver, another broke his bow. So clearly it was a very powerful attack. Having deprived Samba of his chariot during the fight, the Kuru warriors tied him up with great difficulty and then returned victorious to their city, taking the young boy and their princess. So, big victory for them. When the Yadavas, Krishna's family, the Yadu dynasty, when they heard news of this from the sage Narad, now Narad Muni always has to get in on the action, so he got in there and informed Krishna, "Hey, you know what happened? Your son was there, and the Kurus, they've captured him." So Krishna became very angry, and urged on by King Ugrasena, they prepared for war against the Kurus. So it's important to understand now that while Krishna was very upset, that was his son, Balaram cooled everyone down, cooled the tempers of the Vrishni heroes who had already put on their armor. Balaram is the one who purifies the age of Kali, this age of quarrel and hypocrisy that we live in. He helps us in this age to become free in every way. He is that inspiration, that guide, that helper who's there to help not only Krishna but to help us, all of us, in this difficult time that we live in now. So he was the one who purifies the age of Kali and did not want a quarrel between the Kurus and the Vrishnis, Kuru dynasty, and the Vrishnu dynasty. Thus, accompanied by Brahmins and family elders, he went to Hastinapur. Hastinapur is what is now called Delhi. Right? And he went there on his chariot, which was as effulgent as the sun. As he went, he appeared to be like the moon surrounded by ruling planets. Upon arriving at Hastinapur, once again that's Delhi of today, Sri Balaram remained in a garden outside the city and sent his friend Uddhava. You've often heard of Uddhava. There's been many other stories about Uddhava. He sent him ahead to probe King Dhritarashtra's intentions. So we know that King Dhritarashtra is the blind king. So Srila Prabhupada writes, when Balaram reached the precincts of the city of Hastinapur, he did not enter but stationed himself in a camp outside the city in a small garden house. Then he asked Uddhava to meet the leaders of the Kuru dynasty and inquire from them whether they wanted to fight with the Yadu dynasty or to make a settlement. See, there's always this way. You don't have to just go out and fight and be angry. You try to reach a settlement if possible. These are people you know. These are friends of the family. These are relatives. So after Uddhav had offered proper respects to King Dhritarashtra and everyone assembled, Uddhav informed them that Balaram had arrived. Overjoyed to hear that their dearmost friend had come, they first honored Uddhav and then went forth to meet Balaram, carrying auspicious offerings in their hands. So this is the custom of that time. The way you honor people is not just that you, even if you're a king, you don't just sit there on your throne and say, all right, bring the friend in. No. They went out and they went carrying gifts and all kinds of things to give to Balaram. Srila Prabhupada writes, the leaders of the Kuru dynasty, especially Dhritarashtra and Duryodhan, were very joyful because they knew very well that Balaram was a great well-wisher of their family. There were no bounds to their joy on hearing the news, and so they immediately welcomed Uddhava. They then approached Balaram and worshipped him with gifts as were fitting. Those among the Kuru dynasty who understood his true power bowed down to him, touching their heads to the ground. After both parties had heard that their relatives were doing well, so then they exchanged pleasantries. How was the family? How is so-and-so? How is so-and-so? How are the children? Like that. Once they'd heard that their relatives were doing well and both had inquired into each other's welfare and health, Balaram forthrightly spoke to the Kurus. Balaram said, King Ugrasena is our master and the ruler of kings. With undivided attention. So King Ugrasena was the king of Dwarka. With undivided attention, you should hear what he has ordered you to do, and then you should do it at once. King Ugrasena said, even though by irreligious means several of you defeated a single opponent who follows the religious codes, who follows Dharma, still I am tolerating this for the sake of unity among family members. Now, the Kurus weren't going to take this lightly. They became very upset. Upon hearing these words of Balaram, which were full of potency, courage, and strength, and were appropriate to his transcendental power, the Kurus became furious. They said, oh, how amazing this is! The force of time is indeed insurmountable. A lowly shoe now wants to climb on the head that bears the royal crown. In other words, they thought that the lowly Yadus are Krishna's family, his dynasty, the lowly Yadus now wanted to rise above the royal Kurus. They thought of themselves as the royal one and Krishna and his family as the lowly ones. Because after all, Krishna had, was from a cowherd family. And now he'd become this king in Dwarka. So they had these prejudices. They thought of themselves as the real rulers. They continued saying, it is because these Vrishnis, Krishna's dynasty, the Yadus, are bound to us by marital ties that we have granted them equality, allowing them to share our beds and seats and meals. Indeed, if it is we who have given them their royal thrones, only because we looked the other way could they enjoy royal opulences. You notice the arrogance here? And you just really listen. Having prospered by our grace. This is the disease of all human beings, that we are so proud of what we've done. So proud of what, if you're the head of a company, let's say, or let's say you've even given in charity to someone, you feel, I've done so much. But this ahankara, this is the false ego. True spiritually advanced person is humble, not arrogant like this. Doesn't see himself as the doer. Doesn't see himself as, oh, I did this and I did that, but look at you. You're doing this and you're doing that, but you don't appreciate what all I've done for you. Even if that was the case, even if we took on their perspective, there's so much of arrogance in it. So they continue. Having prospered by our grace, these Yadus have now lost all shame and are daring to command us. After the arrogant Kurus, thoroughly puffed up by the opulence of their high birth and relations, after they had spoken such harsh words to Balaram, they turned and went back to their city. Seeing the bad character of the Kurus and hearing their nasty words, the infallible Balaram became filled with rage. So one might think rage is a bad thing. Anger is a bad thing. But notice there's a very interesting contradiction here. The infallible Balaram. Balaram is that supreme being. He is infallible. In other words, has no flaws. And yet, he is filled with rage. Is rage therefore a bad thing or a good thing? Most of us think of it as bad. And in most cases, it probably is, because we use rage in a way that is hurtful, as mostly that is derived from our ego. Somebody hurt my ego, and now I am going to rage on them. Somebody said something unkind to me, said something unfavorable to me. But in this case, what was unkind here was something that was an absolute lie. And it was an insult to Krishna. So Balaram, who is the protector of Krishna, he is there serving him, became very offended. When you find your loved ones are being insulted, it's one thing to be insulted yourself. It's another thing when your loved ones are being insulted. And it's another thing when the Supreme Godhead is being insulted, or his devotees. So Balaram, filled with rage, and his countenance became frightful to behold, and he began to laugh repeatedly. Balaram said, "Clearly the many passions of these scoundrels," referring to the Kuru elders and the Kuru family, "clearly the passions of these scoundrels have made them so proud, they do not want peace. Then let them be pacified by physical punishment, as animals are with a stick." I guess if you can't, work things out, if there can't be a carrot and stick, right? The only way sometimes an animal can be put straight, because it can't understand logic, can't understand a sensible point. And if it's out to hurt you, then the only way that can be handled is through a stick. Balaram continued, "Only gradually was I able to calm the furious Yadus and Krishna. Desiring peace for these Kurus, I came here. But they are so dull-headed, fond of quarrel, and mischievous by nature that they have repeatedly disrespected me. Out of conceit, they dared to address me with harsh words. King Ugrasena, the lord of the Bhojas, Vrishnis, and Andhakas, is not fit to command? How can they say that when Indra and other planetary rulers obey his orders? That same Krishna who occupies the Sudharma assembly hall and for his enjoyment took the Parijata tree from the Devas, from the demigods, that very Krishna is indeed not fit to sit on a royal throne? Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune herself, ruler of the entire universe, worships his feet, and the master of the goddess of fortune, Vishnu, does not deserve the paraphernalia of a mortal king? What nonsense these people are talking. That's the sense I get from here. The dust of Krishna's lotus feet, which is the source of holiness for all places of pilgrimage, is worshipped by all the devas, the demigods. The principal deities of all planets are engaged in his service, and they consider themselves most fortunate to take the dust of Krishna's lotus feet on their crowns. Great devas, great demigods like Brahma and Shiva, and even Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, and I, are simply parts of his spiritual identity. And we also carefully carry the dust of his feet on our heads. But still, Krishna is not fit to use the royal insignia or even sit on the royal throne. We Vrishnis enjoy only whatever small parcel of land the Kurus allow us? Really? And we are indeed shoes, whereas the Kurus are the head? Just see how puffed up these Kurus have become, how intoxicated they are with their so-called power, like ordinary drunken men. What actual ruler with the power to command would tolerate their foolish, nasty words? Today I shall rid the earth of the Kauravas, declared the furious Balaram. And then Balaram took up his plow weapon and rose up as if to set the three worlds ablaze. Balaram angrily dug up Hastinapur, present-day New Delhi, with the tip of his plow and began to drag the entire city into the Ganges river, dragging Hastinapur, the entire city, right? Only Balaram could do this. Srila Prabhupada writes, Balaram seemed so furious that he looked as if he could burn the entire cosmic creation to ashes. Taking his plow in his hand, he began striking the earth with it. The entire city of Hastinapur was separated from the earth. Balaram then began to drag the city. The city had hundreds, maybe thousands of houses and palaces and all kinds of things over there. We're not talking of some small little thing. We're talking about the capital city with massive forts and palaces and houses and all kinds of stuff. He began to drag the entire city towards the flowing water of the river Ganges. Because of this, there was a great tremor throughout Hastinapur, as if there had been an earthquake. And it seemed that the whole city would be dismantled. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti states that Balaram's plow had increased in size, and as he dragged the city of Hastinapur toward the water, he ordered the Ganges river, except for Samba, which is Krishna's son, you should kill everyone in the city with your water. Thus he would fulfill his promise to rid the earth of the Kauravas while making sure that nothing would happen to Samba. Oh, it's very interesting. Later on, this was a moment in which the entire Kaurav dynasty could have been wiped out. Think about it. If that had happened, the Battle of Mahabharata would not take place. Ultimately, that family was wiped out in the Battle of Mahabharata. Along with them, thousands of other clans and other kings who took sides with the Kauravas were also killed in the Battle of Mahabharata. But that was going to happen in the future. And right now, what was happening was this. Seeing that their city was tumbling about like a raft at sea as it was being dragged away, and that it was about to fall into the Ganges river, the Kauravas became terrified. To save their lives, they approached Balaram for shelter, taking their families with them. They even brought Samba and Lakshmana, so the son of Krishna, Samba, and the lady Lakshmana, who was now going to be his wife, and they brought them in front, and they joined their palms in supplication. O Rama, O Balaram, foundation of everything, we know nothing of your power. Please excuse our offense, for we are ignorant and misguided. See, these are the words of humility. Earlier there was none. There was only arrogance. Now, when we are subjected to great suffering, our city is about to be destroyed, our houses are about to be destroyed, our life is about to be destroyed, we are about to be destroyed, then we fall on our knees and become humble. But while we have tremendous power, while we have tremendous wealth, it's not easy for us to develop humility. Hear what humility sounds like. Please excuse our offense, for we are ignorant and misguided. And in truth, we need to understand that's all of us. We are all ignorant and misguided. We all are deluded by our mind, by our intelligence, and by our ego. Man, buddhi, ahankar. We are deluded by these forces. We are deluded by the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. We are deluded by this matrix of this world, the illusion of this world. We are deluded by our minds, which cause us to like and to hate things. We are deluded in all ways. And so it's a very, very difficult process to gradually begin to see what's going on, to see through the layers of illusion and ignorance, and come to this point of humility where you understand how foolish, how ignorant, how misguided you are. The Kauravas now came to that point. And they said to Balaram, you alone caused the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the cosmos. They're recognizing his power now. And of you there is no prior cause. You are causeless. Indeed, authorities say that the worlds are mere playthings for you as you perform your pastimes. O unlimited one of 1,000 heads, because he's also known as Sheshanag. As your pastime, you carry this earthly globe upon one of your heads. At the time of annihilation, you withdraw the entire universe within your body, and remaining all alone, lie down to rest. Your anger is meant for instructing everyone. It is not a manifestation of hatred or envy. See, they've understood correctly. This anger is meant for instructing everyone. It is not from a place of hatred or envy. Those are the places where anger becomes problematic. Then when it is directed from hatred and envy, and it's arising from the ego. Because it's the ego that thinks, oh, I am better than you, or how dare you. That's a whole different attitude here. They say, oh Balaram, you sustain the pure mode of goodness, Shuddha Sattva, and you become angry only to maintain and protect this world. In the purport, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti writes, the Kurus meant to say, because you exhibited this anger, we have now become civilized, whereas previously we were wicked and could not see you, blinded as we were by pride. Just on a footnote, I'd like to point out here that while it is true they're having this moment of awakening, this moment of humility, it will pass, and their true nature will again come back, and they will continue to do awful things. But that's for another time. So here they say, we bow down to you, O Balaram, O soul of all beings, O wielder of all potencies, O tireless maker of the universe. Offering you obeisances, we take shelter of you. So Balaram became pacified by the Kurus, whose city was trembling and who were surrendering to him in great distress. Balaram became very calm and kindly disposed toward them. Do not be afraid, he said, and took away their fear. Duryodhan, the prince Duryodhan, whose daughter it was, being very affectionate to his daughter, gave her as her dowry 1,200 60-year-old elephants, 120,000 horses, 6,000 golden chariots shining like the sun, and 1,000 maidservants with jeweled lockets on their necks. He was a wealthy king. It was the custom to give a gift to your daughter when she's getting married. The Supreme Lord Balaram, chief of the Yadavas of the Yadu dynasty, accepted all these gifts and then departed with his son and daughter-in-law, and his well-wishers bid him farewell. Srila Prabhupada writes, it was the practice of the Kshatriya kings to initiate some kind of fighting between the parties of the bride and bridegroom before the marriage. So there was often that kind of, dispute would take place because they were Kshatriyas, they were warriors. When Samba forcibly took away Lakshmana, the elderly members of the Kuru dynasty were pleased to see that he was actually the suitable match for her. Why? Because he was a great warrior himself. In order to see his personal strength, however, they fought with him, and without any respect for the regulations of fighting, they all arrested him. When the Yadu dynasty decided to release Samba from the confinement of the Kurus, Balaram came personally to settle the matter, and as a powerful Kshatriya, he ordered them to free Samba immediately. Kauravas became superficially insulted by his order, so they challenged Balaram's power. They simply wanted to see him exhibit his inconceivable strength. Ultimately, with great pleasure, they handed over their daughter to Samba, and the whole matter was settled. Duryodhan, the father of the bride, being affectionate towards his daughter Lakshmana, had her married to Samba in great pomp. Balaram was very satisfied after his great reception from the side of the Kurus, and accompanied by the newly married couple, he started towards his capital city of Dwarka. Balaram entered his city Dwarka and met his relatives, whose hearts were all bound to him in loving attachment. In the assembly hall, he reported to the Yadu leaders everything about his dealings with the Kurus. Even today, the city of Hastinapur, Delhi, is visibly elevated on its southern side along the Ganges, thus showing the signs of Balaram's prowess. With that, we end today's narrative, the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, chapters 67 and 68. What did you learn from here? What did you discover? Are there any questions you might have? What can you take home from here? Any thoughts? You can write them down in the text if you like, and I'd be glad to answer. If, however, you don't have any questions, feel free to write them down later. The videos are all on my YouTube channel, and you'll find them there under the playlist Leela, Pastimes of Krishna. Or you can also go to the Divine Love podcast. You'll find them there too. This was episode number 118. I'll be back next Tuesday. See you at the same time. Usually we're on at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern. Today we had some technical delays, so sorry for that. But I hope to see you again. And till then, Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Radhe.